Hello, and welcome to the podcast where good trivia gets rewarded and bad lies are punished. But will we detect the lies?
Well, you might have to use some psychoanalytics to do so. Welcome to the show. My name's Ryan Whittal. This is Warren Robertson.
And this is What's the Fact.
This is What's the Fact. And I said psychoanalytics because someone there is getting all weird on us.
I think he's a bit depressed and he needs us to do free therapy for him because that's tonight's subject, right? Psychology.
Yeah.
Psychology.
I think he said Seelkundige, which could be a sort of a German word for a baby seal. Seelkundige.
This is off to a bad start,
Yeah,
right?
it's off to a rocking comedy blast.
I studied psychology at university because it was an easy credit. In first year, all of the exams were multiple choice. So a lot of people studied it for that. And then because my other two intended majors, law and English, clashed with each other, I landed up actually majoring in psychology. So I've got 3 years of that bullshit.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
I realized halfway through, it turns out we were at Wits at the same time, the 1 year.
Yeah.
The year that I was there, then I failed. But halfway through, I realized I'd taken a very difficult subject choice and I tried to switch over to psych.
Okay.
And they said, no, it's too late.
They were like, you aren't a damaged woman.
You're going to take full course physics and fucking fail it.
Full course physics? Yes, I mean, those are the opposite ends of the university life spectrum, aren't they? Like, kind of like psychology and classics at this end if you want the easy credits, and then physics 1 and maths 2 at this end, you know?
I even went to the psych building. It's like library lawns turn right,
That's
eh?
right,
Yeah,
that's right.
so you were there for 3 years, eh?
Yeah.
We could have been in the same class, maybe.
I mean, I
First,
didn't really go very much. I had to study from my books. I knew some of those ladies that were there to discover themselves. Because a lot of people who do psychology 1, they go there to discover themselves, learn about themselves, find out how their parents ruined them, you know, like that's why I think. I knew a couple of those ladies, and they took very good notes with lots of highlighters.
Oh, lovely!
Because that's a tip. If you haven't done university yet, you haven't studied, those are the people you must find. You must go to the first classes and you must look who's the one who's taking notes with the highlighter, and then be friends with her.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the year, you'll just get the best notes because they're sorted and they're like. Then you just do the color photographs and you've got like.
And then you can go instead for your lectures at that little beer garden thing.
That's right, at the Boz. But I don't know whether that stuff is there backed.
Yeah.
I don't know whether that stuff's there on campus anymore.
Friday afternoons, eh?
Yeah,
That's
Friday
nice.
afternoon drinking at the Boz or at backed. Yeah. That was what Wits University education was. Yeah, fortunately, I somehow managed to get through despite all of that. So when he said psychology, I was like, actually, I know a thing or two about psychology, but what I know it's not very encouraging, I think.
Well, that's fine. I mean, lots of controversy in this field, I think. So say it like you feel it, man.
Yeah, all right, let me start. I'm going to start with a fact. And just straight up give you the fact. I'm not going to give you any intro to it. The more media attention a psychology study gets, the less likely it is to actually be true. That's my fact.
Oh, my word. And you got the data on this?
Well, I have data. Whether it's on this or not, you're gonna have to find out. But I'm saying that the bigger the study is in the media, the more likely you are to have read it in the newspaper or on like News 24 or whatever, the less likely it is to actually be true.
Okay. That's pretty interesting. I have no idea about that. It's such a fascinating thing, the mind. It's almost like outer space, like discovering something about us is like, wow, we've just discovered that this and this. And I guess it goes to the thing of success. You know, if I can fix the cock-ups in my brain, better chance of success in all areas. You know, career, relationship, saving money.
Yeah,
health.
I'm a lazy guy. If I could just fix that one thing. How do I fix that one thing? Oh, here's a study in the media that tells me how to do that.
Gain something,
and it's kind of spread a little bit. This psychology in the media thing, because so many TikToks of people, on there being like, if you dream about her, that means she's dreaming about you. All these kind of like faux psychologists on TikTok. But I'm talking about the real media here. I'm talking about the actual, genuine mainstream, what the right wing calls the mainstream media. And I don't like to kind of tackle the mainstream media
Because you're a
myself.
journalist.
I've been a journalist for a long time. I know that their hearts are in the right place. But
Yes.
what I'm doing now is I'm opening with a direct attack on my former. Yeah, I mean, maybe I am. Maybe I'm just lying to you, right? Maybe I've just started the podcast with a blatant lie.
You did the old Ryanism, hey? You started with a bloody lie. I'm going to say that you I don't know why I want to say it, but I'm going to say that you started with the truth, because these things are funny, and it's always when you delve deeper that it's like, yeah, I know what you mean. So I'm going to say no. I say it's true. The more attention a psychological study gets, the more likely it is to be not true.
Yeah, more likely it is to be false. It is true. It is a truth.
Wow.
You got it. And there's a couple reasons for that, right? Firstly, early 2000s to about 2010, psychology was absolutely smashed to pieces because people were releasing these psychological studies where they'd done tests on like 40 or 50 people, and then they'd drawn a theory or developed a theory off of very small statistical groups. And many of these studies couldn't be replicated, but they were being published anyway because they were coming from psychology professors at university. And then it turned out they did an investigation, and they found out that basically 50% of all of these tests couldn't be replicated. And I believe it's starting to get better now, but they found out, like, essentially, psychology is littered with hundreds and hundreds of scientific studies and papers that are nonsense. They're just made up. If they're not actively lies, they are, as I say, statistically insignificant groups that they were tested on and these sorts of things. And then, so then they firstly discover this, right? And then, there's a lot of big things that kind of came out of that. Do you remember that story of the power position? You adopt the power position. You stand like this, and it makes you feel instantly better. So that study is absolute nonsense. Obviously, they also there was a study on priming, right? Like priming became a big thing in corporate because you can prime your brain to be stronger in a specific area if you just do particular things. And the classic example was professor priming. And the claim was that, like, if you just think about a professor and you think about a stereotypical professor and you spend a lot of time imagining a stereotypical professor, then you do a general knowledge test, you'll actually do much better on the general knowledge test than if you hadn't primed your brain for that particular kind of thinking.
These things are very salesy.
Yeah,
very motivational speaker.
Yeah, motivational speaker, and that falls in with that whole TikTok vibe. Yeah. So these things all got kind of proven to be nonsense. So then a trio of researchers, Wu Yu, Yang Yang, and Brian Uzi, who come from the University of London, University of Notre Dame, and Northwestern University, respectively, they created this machine learning model to basically look at psychology studies and how much they'd appeared in the press and sort of match together and see if there was any kind of correlation between how these things matched up. And it turned out that there was. And they found that the papers that received the more media attention were less likely to replicate. So there were less likely to be tests that could be proven by other scientists.
Yeah.
So the more the media printed them, the less likely they were to be true. And then they thought to themselves, why is that? And the reason is really simple. The reason is really, really simple. And it's because basically the things that the media likes to publish are the things that are surprising or unconventional.
Yes.
So as soon as a study came out with something that was surprising, the media was like, well, it's a legitimate study published in a legitimate journal. We're taking this from a real source. But as it turns out, the source itself, the journal itself, wasn't putting enough effort into making sure that these studies were legitimate. And then the media would get really excited about it. And the weirder it was, the more likely the media were to publish it.
I mean, in news bulletins, the last story is always that, finally, psychologists in the University of Stuttgart have realized that being a mother ups your chances of gaining extra large breasts in your 50s.
I mean, that's not a psychology study, but
No.
yes, that is the kind of thing. That is exactly what that's how stupid shit like the power position, and finally, feeling a little depressed, scientists, not, psychology is a BA degree. Scientists say that if you go and you stand in this one particular position, you're going to feel much happier afterwards, simply because it's going to, I don't know, release endorphins or something. It's all nonsense. Yeah, it's all rubbish. So with that in mind, and this is the reason why I opened with this particular one, is with that in mind, I'd like us to focus on the fact that there is a lot of nonsense in psychology. And I don't know about, I've done a lot of research to make sure that what I'm saying tonight isn't nonsense, and I hope that that the nonsense doesn't get out. But we are still the mainstream media, being on YouTube the way we are. And yeah,
my facts. They're always got a little bit of this oak. I heard it from this
oak in the punch bar. Yeah.
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 And before I go into my fact, I wanted to. I think I've mentioned it on this podcast before. Was it a book? And now it's a movie, The Three Christs of Yspelante. I actually listened to an entire podcast on this about a year ago. But it's now a movie with Richard Gere, who's the psychologist. Yspelante is this town.
See, but that's exactly what we were talking about. How come people want to be psychologists? We've all heard about the gerbil.
So,
it's not true. It's not true.
Yspelante got a psychiatric hospital with 4,000 inmates. No, that's not the right word. Patients. Oh, that's a much better word.
Yeah.
And so the three Christs of Yspelante was these three guys with the sort of savior complex. They literally believed they were Jesus. And so the guys' theory was, if I put them in the same room and they talk amongst each other, they're going to realize that they can't all three be Jesus. So one, and then they'll figure out that this whole thing is nonsense. That was his theory, the psychologist. And shame, it's a sad story because it ended up doing a lot of damage to their mental state, because they became insecure and all of that shit. So it was, but I think the movie tries to make light of it.
Yeah, it's quite a strange situation. Like I remember back when I was at university, one of the doctors I knew, she said she was working in the psych section at Barra, and she said that there was a guy there that, the story started at the beginning of the week where she was like, oh, there's a guy there who he genuinely believes there's a chicken in his head and it's laying eggs in his head and it's causing him agony, like it's causing him pain. And the psychologists are like, this is not a thing we can fix now, but this guy is genuine, he's suffering real pain. So what do we do? So the doctors had a bit of a discussion about it, and they took him to the MRI department, and they put him on an MRI, and they told him that this was to kill the chicken in his head. And they did an MRI on him, and he came out and sure as nuts claimed that the chicken was gone, chicken was dead. Didn't have a chicken in his head anymore. It wasn't laying eggs. It wasn't causing him pain. But then he came back like 3 months later. The chicken was back. It was there again. It was laying eggs in his head again. But it's such an interesting kind of thing, because you tell somebody, oh, this dude believed he had a chicken in his head. Most people, they want to laugh at it. But you're like, no, this was genuinely causing this man pain. This is like... so the three Christs, you think about it, you think, fuck, yeah, this should make sense, right? These three guys, they should all realize only one of you it's like the Highlander.
There can be only one.
Yeah. Sure. But, and on the outside, it feels like it's going to be funny. And then,
not funny.
Richard Gere and the gerbil, though, fucking hilarious.
Well... my opener is a historical fact, and it's quite fun and easy and very interesting, and people have discussed it for centuries, and it's lovely. Not lovely, it's interesting. But Shakespeare, what a genius! Hey, all that content. Hey, what a content creator! Hey, William. And
he was publishing it out. His Patreons were putting big cash in his account every month.
So he...
and he didn't even have to show his feet. We don't know. Maybe he did.
So, and on fans only.
Yeah, if we had a Patreon, Ryan would show his feet. Let us know in the comments if we
fine.
should start a
Put them on the
Patreon.
table. I'll put them on the table.
No, this is behind the
Oh,
content
shit,
wall,
okay,
Ryan. If we
yeah.
started a Patreon for Ryan's feet, would that help us pay off the Mona Lisa?
So, who do you think I'm going to talk about? Do you think I'm going to talk about Hamlet? No. But that's interesting. Doesn't he go a little bit nutty? 'Cause
Yeah, I mean,
is a bit
he
crazy.
plays that he goes nutty. That's the
Ah,
whole
that's
thing. Is
the
he
thing.
plays that he goes insane, and in the process,
His
bums his
poor
girlfriend out. Yeah,
Fucking sad.
super sad. Yeah.
But
You
the
wanna talk about
Scottish
Macbeth?
Lady
Macbeth.
Yes,
Okay.
they think now, and I think it's quite genius because this stuff wasn't spoken about officially as a etymological thing. Psychology wasn't.
Okay.
But they think in hindsight there was
They. I love this. They. It could be like journalists from People magazine. Like believe that.
so I think she had post-traumatic stress disorder. That's my fact.
Post-traumatic stress disorder
Yeah.
is what makes you tell your husband to kill people. No, I don't think that's
Well,
what she
no,
had.
that's
Right?
in the beginning. That's in Act 1. I'm talking about Act
No.
5.
No, I
Do
don't.
you know how the play goes?
Yeah, I know the play. I don't think that's what she suffered from. I don't think she was suffering from post-traumatic anything. I don't think that's not really. Also, who's they? I do need to know who they are. Like people with TikTok accounts, Ryan.
No, it was before. It's one up from TikTok.
Oh,
it's
I see.
Google.
Okay.
It's still
Or is it those
Google.
same people that analyze all the characters from Winnie the Pooh?
Oh,
Yeah, they're all like
I read that
mental
book.
conditions.
A lady at work gave me. Colleen gave me the Tower of Tigger and the Tay of Pooh or some.
Yeah,
the Tower of Piglets.
That's
and
the
Tay of-
philosophy one. No, but now people
that's
are like
lovely.
each of the characters in Winnie the Pooh has got some sort of mental health disorder.
ADHD's Tigger.
Yeah, and then Eeyore's depression
Oh.
and like so they've all
Piglet's
got.
OCD. Or is he OCD? No, that's
no,
Rabbit.
Rabbit would be OCD.
Piglet's
yeah.
just a sad fucker who he sweeps his cottage and then the wind blows it back. He's very scared.
Yeah, maybe he's just got anxiety.
Oh, shame.
Maybe. I mean, I relate.
You little piglet, you.
Yeah, I'm like the child of if Piglet and Eeyore and Tigger had all fucked.
No, I'm Winnie. He's just fucking dumbass,
He's
naive.
cheery.
He's just
Oh, he's
naive.
happy. I mean, it's like can't hold anything against him. Apparently, there's a new Winnie the Pooh movie that they're not going to show in China. I'm not going to talk about it because I don't want us to get it banned off YouTube. But it's got to do with G.
No,
Yeah.
okay. So, Oaks on Wikipedia, there's concurrence that she had post-traumatic stress disorder.
No, she didn't.
And there's two reasons for that.
Yeah.
I,
But so is it true?
yeah.
Oh, it's true. All right.
In fact, it's true. Yes, the psychologists believe that Shakespeare was describing post-traumatic stress disorder when he wrote the role of Lady Macbeth. That is the answer to the fact.
Why?
And the two reasons were flashbacks. So and the
Like a Vietnam vet.
yeah, the flashbacks was the blood on my hands,
Yeah.
and then even conversations where she tried to gaslight her husband with Banquo's ghost. Oh, don't be silly. And then she, before she went nuts, she was even, it's just that he gets these tremors at his childhood, but in Shakespeare.
So what you're saying is, in order for her to be gaslighting her husband about Banquo's ghost,
yeah.
Banquo's ghost must in fact be real.
I hear what you're saying.
So
Well-
what you're saying, it depends. This entire
Yes,
theory
you
depends
see.
on whether you believe in ghosts.
Well, he's going, oh my God, a ghost. She's like, stop your shit. Sorry, he's a bit nuts.
To be fair, that's not gaslighting. Because
Well-
there probably wasn't a ghost there, Ryan.
Yes, but I know it's a duck. You know it's a duck. Does the duck know it's a duck? But if the duck doesn't...
No, I think if she's saying my husband sees ghosts, he's a bit nuts. She's not gaslighting him. Unless ghosts are real. And again,
Well,
please jump
good
in the
point
comments
there.
and let us know.
Okay, fine. Good point. Okay, but she, publicly she never took her husband's side. She said, "Oh,
no,
sorry
because
about
ghosts
that."
aren't real, Ryan.
Right, sorry about that. He's a bit loopy.
Right.
Is what she said to the guests
Yeah.
at the party, and then she hears about the Thane Fife had a wife. So even Macduff's kids were like, so she heard it was just blood upon blood upon blood, which was the tragedy of Macbeth. But she starts to obviously there's the sleepwalking scene, and she sees blood on her hands. She talks about the Thane Fife had a wife, and she relives the night of the killing of the king, and ultimately, you know what happens to her in the play? A bit Ophelia-ish. She jumps from the building. She kills herself, and so that's why they say, and of course sleepwalking, not sleeping well, and sleep is a big theme in that play, and. In the beginning, he can't sleep after he's murdered. And she's like, just relax, go to sleep. And in the meantime, she starts to battle with sleep. So, yeah, seeing flashbacks and battling to sleep, and ultimately can't face it and just took the great leap, they think, post-traumatic stress
Yeah,
disorder.
I mean, look, it's a long reach.
It is a long
but
reach.
it is exactly the kind of thing I was talking about with the media, right? Like, that's exactly the sort of study and exactly the sort of
Lady
nonsense paper.
Macbeth had
Yeah.
post-traumatic stress
the
disorder.
media would love to print. It's exactly the sort of absolute garbage. But all right, no, that's fine. All right, let's deal with a genuine one that everybody knows, Ivan Pavlov.
Yes.
Yeah, you know him. So the story is that physiologist Ivan Pavlov, he believed that our psychology could affect our physiology. So what we think can affect us kind of physically. And he set about proving it by ringing a bell whenever he fed his dogs, and then eventually he could just ring the bell and it
they
would
would
make his
start
dogs
to
salivate.
Yeah.
And that's my fact.
Oh, well, you know, or is that an urban legend? Because I had heard that one before. You ring the bell and the dog starts salivating. Pavlov's dogs.
Pavlov's dogs is famous, right?
So, you know, I think we spoke before the podcast, and we spoke about what could have been an interesting pop culture thing for tonight was like A Clockwork Orange. And that's about conditioning as well. So the Pavlov dog thing is like training, conditioning. Clockwork Orange investigates that, but even like to change you morally, you know. And it was, I suppose it's controversial because when you got the religious repentance, I was bad, now I'm good. I was, you know, walking in the dark,
we can
now
talk
seeing
about
the light.
conditioning, but that's also, it's one of those studies that's very controversially been proven. The concept of conditioning in a human in that way, like in Clockwork Orange.
Yeah.
You know, like in anti-homosexuality training.
Oh, yeah.
You know, that stuff has all been heavily
Yeah.
dismissed.
So
heavily
it
dismissed.
does more damage than
yeah.
does
Yeah,
damage.
yeah.
So I've heard about that's what he did with his dogs, and I've seen with dogs, you know, I've seen them. Don't know if they salivate necessarily, but you can train a dog. So is your fact that he did this with his dog, or that the mind
fact is
can
as follows.
influence the body?
My fact is as follows. Physiologist Ivan Pavlov believed that psychology can affect the physiology. So he set about testing it. He would ring a bell whenever he fed his dogs, and eventually he could just ring the bell and the dogs would salivate.
Sure.
It's really simple.
Yes, but
Yeah.
it might be one of these weird things like the placebo effect. And so I'm going to say the fact is true. And whether there's evidence of it, I think there is this unknown that doctors will go, placebo, sure. Sometimes it works.
Oh, no, but I'm not talking about what he discovered at the end. What I'm saying is this is what, like, he set about doing a thing.
Yes.
And then he rang his bell and then the dogs.
I'm going to say, yes, it's true. I know that story, and I think it's true.
Look, I mean, you're not alone. The vast majority, the vast majority of people would have said it's true. In fact, the very famous.
This is one of your. You just proven your point from your first fact.
You're right. Well, no, hang on. This is a bit more complex than that, right? Because, so I mean, you're not alone because like behaviorist B.F. Skinner, whose name is actually Behurus Frederick Skinner. He developed like the entire idea of conditioning as being like the behavioral conditioning as being the way that we learn and the way that our brains eventually like develop. He worshipped Pavlov. Absolutely believed this particular story and version of events, and that this is what Pavlov did. But actually, Pavlov's experimentation had like nothing to do with psychology. Pavlov was a bit of a look. Let's say he was old school in his thinking about animals, because what he was doing was he was actually focusing on how eating excited the salivary glands and the gastric processes and the pancreatic processes. And what he did was he used to cut holes in the necks of dogs and then feed them, so then the food would fall out, but then he'd have holes cut the entire length of their gastric process, and he would test the amount of saliva and gastric juices and things that were generated along the way. And I mean, essentially he did this so much, and I can't really work out why he did it. But at the end, what he was doing was he was collecting the dog's gastric juices, because they would eat for like 7 hours, and then obviously they weren't getting any food because the food is all falling out of this giant hole in their neck. And he would generate the gastric juices, and he would sell it as a product that could help other people who had unsettled stomachs. So he would sell the gastric juices of these particular dogs.
You see, nobody knows this fucking horror show. This is like that movie that we've banned the naming of on this podcast. It's like that kind of movie.
Yeah. No, but he used to produce up to a quart of these gastric juices. Like a quart is 750 mils, right? Like it's a wine bottle of gastric juices that he used to make per dog per day, that he would then sell. And then he would, and that was what was bringing in like a lot of cash into his particular lab. But while he was doing that, he noticed that he would get higher salivation immediately the second the people in white coats would walk in with the dog food. So he did, in fact, accidentally discover that psychology can affect physiology. And then what he did was he did a side test on this particular thing, and he but he didn't do it with a bell at all. It's very famous, the bell. He did it with a metronome. So he used to start the clicking of the metronome, and he used to test the salivation of the dogs regarding the metronome. So he did accidentally discover that dogs can be like trained by psychological effects to create more saliva. But he didn't do it at all. You know, the way it's described, it's like this cutesy thing while he was feeding his dogs. But he literally, like, he had these dogs with,
This is savagery, eh?
Yeah, I mean, when you hear the stories of how he used to basically, like, milk these dogs, they had the holes in their necks and they would get excited, the dogs. And they would, like, he went for dogs that would sit and just eat and eat and eat and eat and wouldn't give up. Eating while the food fell out of their throats, so he could milk them for as long as possible. And then, I mean, the story of Pavlov is a bit weird, because then the communists take power, and now him as a famous scientist, they take away all his Nobel Prize money, they take away like everything from him, and they leave him and his family like in this tiny lab doing their experiments. But at the same time, they respect him because he's world famous Nobel Prize winning like scientist Ivan Pavlov. And so there's this really complex relationship he has with communism, where eventually, like, he threatens them and they give him more money, and ultimately he has a state funeral at which like 100,000 people come to. But yeah, I think he was a little bit Frankenstein more than you know, like the psychological theorist that we think of him as. Yeah, a very strange man. But,
that is totally gross and caterpillar manish. It's terribly gross.
Caterpillar man.
That's really gross. That's what I was referring to.
Yeah, but it's the human centipede.
Oh, that's what I was yeah.
Caterpillar man. Caterpillar man sounds like a better name. I was like, Caterpillar man sounds like the children's version of the human centipede.
Sorry, we said that phrase again. That's terrible. Oh, that's what I was...
No, the human centipede. We can say the human centipede as much as we like, because the human centipede isn't on YouTube's list of banned phrases.
It should be.
Like, you're not even allowed to talk about, you know, there's a lot of stuff you're not allowed to talk about on YouTube.
Yeah.
without bleeping it out. But the
Wow.
human centipede, you can
Oh
talk about that
my
as much
word.
as you like. The human centipede is
please-
not a bad.
please,
It's
YouTube.
not going to affect us negatively on the
Please
algorithm.
ban
at all.
that. Ban it, YouTube. Oh my. Well, once again, I've got no amazing link from yours except Pavlov, well known.
Yeah, I mean, as I
Sigmund
say, it
Freud.
did lead to B.F. Skinner developing the whole theory of kind of psychological development through behavioral patterning. So he was the one who first said, like, the stuff we do a lot as children will become who we are as adults. So if you make a child work,
Yeah,
lot.
and it's become
When-
like a popular sort of phrase in our popular parlance. And you can imagine Prince Charles saying it in a dirty phone call to Camilla. It's like, when I smell your perfume, I'm like Pavlov's dog, darling. Which is
my food falls out of my throat. Horrible.
All right, so from one famous guy to another one.
All right, good.
Sigmund Freud. He was the first
I mean,
person.
Yeah, Freud was a character, right? Like,
Yeah. Maybe not quite the father of psychology, but maybe.
yeah, I mean,
Modern,
yeah,
yeah.
pretty close. He was afraid of ferns.
Really?
Yeah, I think ferns and trains. This is a thing.
Really?
Listen, whether this is factual or not, this is one of those facts that you hear, in a bar, and then it stays with you forever. Ferns and trains. He was afraid of them.
But he was, my fact is, he was the first person to use the phrase the subconscious.
It's possible. He eventually had 3, if I remember correctly, from my psychology days, divisors. He had the id, the ego, and the superego.
Yeah.
Were the 3 parts of the consciousness. But yeah, so he did talk about how some of it's you're conscious about, and then some of it's happening kind of in the background. So yeah, I think the subconscious is a thing. I think it's the battling of those 3 forces, isn't it? Isn't that the subconscious? I don't know whether he was the first to use it, but I think he understood it to be a thing.
Well, no, he wasn't the first.
Yeah.
It was a French psychologist called Pierre Janet in 1889. But he did, in a paper, refer to it in 1893. So 4 years later, he described the subconscious to describe associations and impulses that are not accessible to the consciousness. But he later abandoned the term for the phrase unconscious, which today we just think, they're sleeping.
Yeah, you're asleep. Yeah.
And he said of the subconscious, he said, if someone talks of subconscious, I cannot tell whether he means the term topographically to indicate something lying in the mind beneath consciousness, or qualitatively to indicate another consciousness, a subterranean one, as it were. He is probably not clear about any of it. The only trustworthy antithesis is between conscious and unconscious.
Yeah, okay. So what he means is you do it unconsciously. You think you do it without thinking. Yeah, I mean, fair enough. It does mean it could be like the thought behind your logic, So
Yeah.
so you do have those moments where you think a thing and then you have a second alternate thought. You must have had that where you're like, oh, I would love to steal the bread. No, you wouldn't. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have those 2
That
thoughts together.
battle,
Yeah, so
yeah.
subconscious, I can see what he's talking about. Where you say, there's this underthought,
Yes.
or I would never steal towels from a hotel. Yes, you would. That could be a subconscious thought. But
this stuff
he's
is
talking
ex-
about
is
he's talking about the thoughts you
interesting.
don't even think about. Yeah.
Absolutely. This stuff is interesting, and one could poo-poo it or say that these old fogies are arguing about sub or un or what the thing is. But the point that they dare to come up with another universe in your brain that you're not aware of, another space.
Yeah.
Because and for me, I will, when you consider what contemplation is about one's life, if I'm having I'm in a slightly bad mood and I can't quite tell why, then what I tend to do is just sit and do nothing and think about it and go, what's bothering me and why is it bothering me and what is this? And I think you're bringing the sub stuff to the top and you're going, do I actually want that? Because I'm acting like I don't, but actually I do.
So there's
Why is
there's some
that,
pretty
you know?
controversial recent studies, right? There's some things that go like, all right, in your body there is more bacteria than there is actual like human like body, right? So, and they've discovered gut bacteria that literally sends signals to your brain for certain types of foods.
Ah, fuck.
So then you eat those certain types of foods to feed your gut bacteria. So
Yeah.
are the gut bacteria manipulating you like a puppet? You know,
I bet.
are they sitting inside of you? Are we talking when we talk about our unconscious? Is it part of our brain? Is it part of the primal brain, or are we talking about our unconscious as those manipulations of the bacteria that are particularly like interested in a particular type of thought? And so there's
Bastards.
yeah, like psychology is just becoming ridiculous now, and eventually psychology, people are going to laugh at us for having a podcast about psychology because psychology is not going to be a thing, right? No, they go like psychology at the moment is really kind of cutesy thinking about how our brains might work, but it doesn't really involve the hard science. And ultimately, what's going to happen is they're going to work out the chemistry and the hard science of how our brain interacts with the bacteria in the body and how it all kind of fits together. And things like, they used to believe in psychology is going to be like they used to believe in leeches. You know, it's the same kind of medical principle. We don't understand what's going on with our brain. And you know, when you sort of say like, I try and work out why I'm unhappy, the chances are you might be unhappy because you're hungry or because you're missing a particular chemical out of your brain or because rather than because it's a particular thing that's necessarily bothering you. So the chances are it's a type, and we do know many of these chemicals now. You know, I mean, when you see the advancement in terms of psychiatry and how they manipulate the chemistry of the brain these days, there's a lot more that we know than when I was studying psychology, which basically we knew there was dopamine and we knew there was, you know, but we didn't know what it did. We didn't know specifically what each of them did. And we're at the point where we're going, well, this one is triggered by these things and this one's triggered by these things, and they do these kind of regulatory roles in the brain. So we're getting a lot further down the line, but I think eventually it's all gonna come down to chemical processes, right? Like, I mean, you're gonna argue with me and tell me there's a soul in there as well, which is also, if you do believe in a soul, then that makes psychology even more complex because now you're battling against the bacteria and the subconscious primal animal brain and the foreground brain. And then you've got your little soul trying to fight against all of that and try and make you a good person. If that's, you know, there's the whole psychology thing.
No, I appreciate that in the pursuit of science, that it's like we need to find physical explanations for phenomenon. And so, you know, you can't go God of the gaps if you really want to do things that you can test and know for sure. You've got to pursue that. You've got to constantly spread that sort of, you've got to push the boundaries of that.
I love the idea, though, that the bacteria are secretly in charge. You know, there's that thing that's like, where they say, like, if aliens were to analyze our planet from the outside and then want to talk to the most dominant species on the planet, they would totally ignore us and go and talk to bacteria. Because they're like, those guys who think they're in charge... Thank you very much, Dietz. A bottle opener of some kind. Those people who think they're in charge are actually controlled by millions of bacteria. So we need to talk to those guys.
That's what I'm actually doing. I'm communicating with the bacteria.
Right.
I made the joke in my stand-up about where the Imagine Dragon song, Where My Demons Hide. It's my bacteria. I mean, I had lunch with Zizi the other day, and Stellies isn't known for its fish and chips. So I got this. Like, what do you feel like, Dad? Where can I get fish and chips here in Stellies? Oh, I don't know. Let me look on the... I just needed fish and chips in Stellies.
I mean, so then there's a psychology test that says, and I've always, my whole life, I've genuinely believed if I'm craving something, it's because my body wants a particular vitamin or a thing, right? But it turns out that's not true. There's a medical study that shows there's no connection between those two things. So it's just us deluding ourselves as per usual.
I want to go with it, though.
So this isn't really psychology, but it's about thought, and I thought, like, let's shoehorn it in here, right? Because so I read an interesting stat. There was like a man beheaded cleanly, right? Cut his head off, straight. Will continue to be alive and capable of thought for a while after an incident, meaning that those beheaded at the guillotine were probably aware on the fact that their head was rolling around in a basket. And when I say a while, initially they were saying 6 or 7 seconds, but now they believe it may be as long as 30 or 45 seconds.
My word, that is a frightening thought. It's a terrible thought. But at least it's only 45 seconds long.
But that's my fact.
Right. So they
Right.
think
So,
it's
so
45.
that it could be as long as 45 seconds. Yeah.
Okay. Made me think of that story, the case of Monsieur Valdemar, about the Edgar Allan Poe little short story where they hypnotized the dude just before he died, and then he died.
Oh yeah.
But he was still under hypnosis. So he was speaking from the grave. So I may recall hearing something about this sort of thing, that the eyes moved. Maybe the eyes moved or they blinked, or I don't know. But there was something weird about this, and what they know about modern science now, and maybe the
So
sort
that
of
let me tell you.
synapses
Let me tell you.
or the
Yeah. Let me tell you
blah,
that
blah,
story.
blah, blah.
I'll tell you that story. What happened is, I don't know the guy's name, but he went to the guillotine as a scientist, and he said to his mate, "Listen, once they chop my head off, I'm going to try and blink my eyes for as long as I can, and you count."
Oh my
You
word!
count for as long as you possibly can, like how many seconds it takes. You'll learn something. Like let's use my death for.
Okay,
Like
so
a
he was
legit
going
thing.
there anyways.
Yeah. So, so he goes up.
What a
and,
dude! Always working.
Yeah, so,
always
so
working.
his friend said he blinked his eyes for 7 seconds afterwards, which is where the initial number, that 7 seconds, kind of comes from, the initial belief. But I'm saying other evidence has now meant that we believe it could be as long as 45
shit,
seconds. That's my actual
crazy.
fact, is the extension. Saying other evidence believes it could be as long as 45 seconds.
Oof. Well, no, I'm gonna have to say there's no ways, unless they go, the heart stops beating, the brain's still awake, and what does that mean? Are you alive? Are you conscious? Does the brain know what the hell? Maybe it's like load shedding. We first do Brackenfell, then Durbanville, and then you just see the lights going out.
You think
It's-
like in
it's-
parts.
yeah,
In parts. Yeah.
So,
Yeah, look, it would be very difficult to get funding for an experiment to do this properly, right? I'm gonna need 100 students. Sorry, no, I need a statistically relevant amount of students. I need 8,000 students, and we're gonna guillotine them all, and then we're gonna count how many
well,
seconds.
there was that great movie, and then there was a remake. It was a great movie. That's where Julia Roberts met her first husband, and William Baldwin was in there. These medical students.
Oh, yeah, where they kill themselves.
Flatliners.
Flatliners. That's right.
Remember that, eh?
Kiefer Sutherland, I think, was in there
Kiefer
as well. Yeah.
Sutherland. I think they're married. Yeah.
Not Kiefer Sutherland and Julia Roberts.
Yes.
Other people.
No, they married each other. Yeah, they were.
Kiefer Sutherland married Julia Roberts.
Yeah.
Filthy Kiefer.
And okay, so I'm gonna say it's time to decide yes or no. I'm gonna say no. 7 seconds extended to 45. No, I don't think there's any ways they could know that. That's too bloody gross.
So what they did was they have uncovered further examples of incidents in which, and let me tell you the stories. All right, so a woman by the name of Charlotte Corday, the assassin of Jean-Paul Marat, was guillotined in 1793. And effectively, what happened is after she was guillotined, the executioner's assistant dug in the basket and pulled up her head, and he slapped it on both cheeks. And there's a report that the entire crowd saw her face get angry at being slapped. And so that was after the head was in the basket, after somebody had lifted her out, after they had slapped her. So now people have been saying, like, okay, clearly it doesn't cause instant death, which is then why this dude went blinking to the guillotine after that. Was he said, all right, well, let's see. And you got to admire him, but there's only one other guillotine person I admire more than him. There's a count that went to the guillotine, and just beforehand they showed him his death warrant, and he read it and he went, "You made 3 spelling mistakes," and those are his last words.
What a legend!
What a guy, man after my own heart. Anyway, but yeah, so then what happened is in 1794, a German surgeon called Sommerung, he argued in a Parisian newspaper that the consciousness of feeling may persist even if blood circulation is terminated, partial, or weak. And he said that essentially the head would remain alive as long as there was enough oxygen in the brain. So perception would happen for as long as there was oxygen in the brain. And he said that this would mean that the overwhelming sensation for the brain at that point would be the pain in their neck. which we're told is the beginning of the end for the guillotine. But that happened in 1794, and the last guillotining was 1970s. So France used the guillotine into the 1970s, which means that essentially
can't
like
possibly
Pink
be
Floyd
telling
were
the
making
truth.
music. Yeah, Pink Floyd were making music when there was the last guillotining. But anyway,
What the fuck is wrong with the French?
yeah. So then there's a story of a French doctor by the name of Barreau, who was permitted to make an investigation of the severed head of a criminal called Langwil immediately after the guillotining. And he said, here is what I was able to note immediately after the decapitation. This is what I want to read to you. He said, the eyelids and lips of the decapitated man worked in irregular rhythmic contractions for about 4 or 6 seconds. I waited several seconds longer. The spasmodic movements ceased. The face relaxed. The lids half closed in the eyeballs, leaving only the white of conjunctiva visible, exactly as in dying, which we have occasion to see every day. It was then that I called out in a strong, sharp voice, Langwil, and I saw the eyelids slowly lift up without any spasmodic contraction. I insist advisedly on this peculiarity, but with an even movement, quite distinct and normal, such as happens in everyday life with people awakened or torn from their thoughts. Next, Langwil's eyes very definitely fixed themselves on mine, and the pupils focused themselves. I was not then dealing with a vague, dull look, without any expression that can be observed any day in dying people to whom one speaks. I was dealing with undeniably living eyes which were looking at me. So there you are, yeah.
That is a bloody Edgar Allan Poe short story, that.
Yeah, but it's true, yeah. So there you go. By 1956, further research had proved, in the words of governmental advisors, P. de Levere and Fournier, that death by decapitation is not instantaneous. Every vital element survives, and it is a savage vivisection followed by a premature burial. The French government abolished execution by decapitation in
No, not
1977.
No.
1977, yeah. Same year the first Star Wars came out. That's right, yeah, isn't
That
it?
is crazy.
Yeah. So the Star Wars and guillotining are like on the same.
Surely they were the only sort of Western country doing that sort of thing. Look, hanging's not a particularly nice way to
No,
go.
listen, there's no nice way to suddenly make somebody die. You know, it's not. I mean, as America repeatedly proves, like, you know, their system is barbaric in the extreme. You know, the electric chair and chemical injection.
Oh, my word. But that is a fascinating fact. That really, really is. I'm going to take us from the macabre French to the fascinating Yanks across the Atlantic. And the book, The Electric Kool-Aid Acid Test, there is a mental health psychology connection there. It's written by Tom Wolfe. I've read it. And it was fascinating. And it is the story of the guy who wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. Which is my fact. That's just my fact. We can talk about those things a little if you like.
I know there is a book about the writing of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's
Yeah,
Nest.
I think they call it.
Yeah, I don't know whether it's this particular book, but I'm going to say yes, it's true. Yeah, I'm going to say it's true.
Yes, it is true. Simple as that. It's true. It fascinated me because I first watched the movie, which is a lovely movie. It won 5 Oscars. Have you seen the movie?
No.
Oof, it is excellent.
Oh, you mean One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest? Or
No, I don't think there's a movie about.
Oh no, I've
the
seen. Yeah,
electric
I've
Kool-Aid.
seen One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
5 Academy Awards, and then I read the book, and it turns out that it's not autobiographical, but he did have a stint where he went to a psychiatric sort of war veterans kind of place, and that dude he's the author of One Flew, and he was kind of
I
experimenting.
like how you call it One Flew.
Yeah, One
You know,
Flew.
I'm too cool to say the whole name of this book. I'm going to shorten it like we're good friends.
Yeah, and he was into
my personal favorite is Of Mice. I love Of Mice.
Of
What a
Mice.
big fan I am of mice.
I was halfway through that movie. It's quite lovely as well. I must watch the whole thing. I haven't read the book.
But is it confusing? What do you call the Bible? The. Going home, I'm going to read a bit of the.
And so, yeah, so So the story of One Flew is a dude. Look at me.
Yeah.
He's not really. He's trying to reduce his sentence, or he'd rather claim to be nuts than he gets sent to a mental asylum. And he makes all these friends, and he sees the tyranny of Nurse Ratched and all that stuff. Lovely movie, lovely book. But it's the author had a stint in a mental health place, but more just helping the veterans with some psychedelics. So there was a bit of this kind of thing happening in the 30s and 40s. And he also, where was that connection? Yes, that guy, the electric Kool-Aid acid test.
Tomo.
Yeah, but the guy wrote One Flew.
Oh, okay.
He'd go around on a party bus with day glow, total hippie stuff. Before the Beatles actually did the Magical Mystery Tour in the UK, and hold parties and have Kool-Aid and have great parties. And they lived this sort of hippie life and communes and stuff, but experimenting with Kool-Aid. And
With LSD.
yes. And this dude was doing it before that famous guy who was running for governor of California alongside Ronald Reagan, who
Timothy Leary.
took it the next level. Yeah.
Right.
So the author of One Flew of the Cuckoo's Nest was
You're saying he was like an early LSD.
Yes, tester.
I mean,
and putting
so
it in
now there's these recent studies that are kind of showing that hallucinogens could be good for certain mental health conditions, and but in micro and small doses, and they talk about administering these things for mental health reasons.
and
I
then
don't know. People
yeah.
in the 40s, 50s, 60s, they were taking a lot of drugs.
Yeah.
I think if my generation had gone to anything even vaguely like World War II, we
So
might have
many
might have
drugs.
also created a fucked up society that then scarred 3 generations after us.
We've seen Trainwreck. What's that documentary? Thingy 99, Woodstock 99. Oh, what a disaster! That was our generation. So many drugs.
No, I disowned myself from Woodstock '99.
Jeez. But also the Beatles. Then did you know they wrote the campaign song for Timothy Leary when he
Did
ran for
they?
governor? Come Together was actually the campaign song.
Is that your fact?
No,
That's just
a little fun
like a
fact on the
bonus
side.
fact.
Yeah. So I love that. Yeah, this is an interesting connection between One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, which takes place in a mental health asylum. The guy wasn't really mental health, and it's a little bit based on the author's life. And the author's actual life was covered in a book by Tom Wolfe called The Electric.
What is the author's
Acid.
name? Have you written it down? Have a
No.
look. Have a bit of. You didn't
don't
write.
know.
You didn't look now up the name
Who wrote One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest?
of the author of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
No.
That's
And-
shameful.
And so what's
Sorry,
fascinating
not
is
One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. It's obviously One Flew. It's not. One doesn't. Ken Kesey. There you are.
Ken
you see?
Kesey.
Yeah.
Yeah, so and he was the dude who kind of was the front runner of the hippie movement and especially acid and stuff. It's just I love that.
Acid and stuff.
It's just a
You
fascinating
just used to
connection.
take a lot of drugs. Listen, a lot of the authors of that era took a lot of drugs. I mean, we have a lot of very, very good books from around the 40s, 50s, and 60s because people were taking a lot of drugs. Not to mention, we have a lot of very good music because people were taking a lot of drugs. We have
Yeah.
a lot of good art because people were taking a lot of drugs. You want me to pinpoint one specific author as being someone who's taking a lot of drugs? Fine. Ken Kesey was taking a lot of drugs. Even if it's not part of his official story, he was definitely taking a lot of drugs. It doesn't, it doesn't matter. Yes, he was. Of course he was. Yeah.
Do you know that they translated One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest? They sold it in Mexico. It did very well.
Oh, no. I can see like a face-slappingly terrible joke.
Yeah. They
Like,
called it.
it's coming over the hill.
Yeah, they called it Juan Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest.
Juan flew over.
Yeah.
You didn't even, Juan lives in Potchefstroom
yeah,
and he
shucks,
he
man.
hopes to play for the Bulls one day.
Juan.
Yeah, Juan flew over.
Juan
the-
Flew Over the yeah.
I mean, that would
my-
have been a good
that would've
joke.
been
It's
good.
not a terrible joke.
But I highly recommend the book's written in a very weird style. He tries to speak like a hippie from the word go. It's rather excellent, But he gets straight into it. Hey, man, yo, what's happening? But that's just how he talks, even in as describing stuff. You know, man, then we went there. Man, the sun was hot. Yo, it was so... It's very funny. But you first don't realize what the hell's going on here. He's writing like a hippie. Tom Wolfe. It was the new journalism. That's what they called it.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. You know what I've been doing the entire time you've been talking? Is trying to think of a book that's got a really long name that I can just shorten to 2 words. And all I could think of the whole time, my brain was just giving me the names of Nabokov books. So I was like, I can't just say pale. That's not funny. No one's going to get that for Pale Fire. Can't just say lol for Lolita. Like, God, what am I supposed to do here?
They did it in high school. Like when I was in matric, and we had to.
Oh, the other kids, the popular kids.
Yeah.
They did it in high school. I never got to do it in high school.
Yeah.
But I had to wait until I was 19 before I got to do
They
it.
just called it Gatsby. Yeah. The Great
Oh,
Gatsby.
yeah.
Gatsby. Yeah.
No. No, you're right. You're right. They used to call that Shakespeare play Othello. Hey? Fucking losers. I don't know. Anyway, right, we're on the internet, so I'm going to talk about a thing that the internet loves to talk about, the Dunning-Kruger effect. Have you heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect?
No.
This is amazing. You must be the only internet person who doesn't know what the Dunning-Kruger effect is. Okay. What it is the Dunning-Kruger effect it was a study that was done by a guy by the name of David Dunning and Justin Kruger. And effectively, the Dunning-Kruger effect occurs when a person's lack of knowledge and skills in a certain area makes them so ignorant that they don't know they're ignorant. So they think they've got enough knowledge that they fully understand a thing, but they haven't progressed enough to have enough knowledge to see how little they know about it. So then there's a flip side on that, which is that those who excel in a given area think the task is simple for everyone. So then they underestimate their relative abilities. So it's kind of like a curve where it says, like, if you know nothing, then you think you know a lot. And then as you learn a little bit, you kind of start going, oh, actually I know nothing. But you're able to gauge your knowledge accurately. And then as you come out the other side and you become an expert, you start gauging your expertise badly, because you start saying, well, obviously this is a thing that everybody knows.
Oh, I see.
So that's the Dunning-Kruger effect. Yeah.
So all 3 of those situations, they're all just a little bit not in touch with reality in one way.
No. So if you're in the middle, if you've got a bit of knowledge, then you've got enough knowledge to understand, I know something about this, but I don't know. There's a lot I don't know. So at that point, you actually have a clear understanding of where you are in the curve. You know what's going on.
I always used to say, quite philosophically, after 1 year after the first year, that if you've learned nothing about film at AFTA in your first year, if all you've learned is like, fuck, making a movie is hectic.
Yeah.
It's just so much goes into it. And if that's all you've learned after the first year, you've learned enough, because it's just so vast and crazy, and it's just hectic.
I used to say a different thing. I used to say, if you learned one thing through your psychology course and you didn't learn enough, and you're probably going to fail the exam, you need to learn at least 70% of the things to pass your exam. I guess that's why I was at university for significantly longer than you were. Because they probably didn't say to you, for all the marks, Ryan, what is the one thing?
So you've described your fact was describing the Dunning-Kruger effect.
That's the Dunning-Kruger effect.
Love it.
Yeah, and I'm saying that it's a real phenomenon, and it's one that obviously, like, people like to refer to Facebook as being the Dunning-Kruger National Park, because there's so many people there with stupid opinions, they don't know how ignorant they are about a thing, so they think they know everything, and they talk about it. But so that's my fact. It's a thing.
Yeah, I must say it's a thing, and it sounds it makes a lot of sense, and it's lovely, and it's quantifiable and data supported.
Yeah. So I mean, as I say, there were 2 researchers, David Dunning and Justin Kruger. They coined the term when they started trying to kind of measure this effect. What they did was they did 4 studies assessing this particular thing, and to test the participants' actual knowledge versus their perceived ability. They tested them in humor and logical reasoning and in English grammar. For instance, what they did was they took 84 students in the grammar study, and they made them complete a knowledge on American written English. So you had to be able to kind of, and then afterwards they asked them, how do you think you did? And they found that it plotted that curve. The people who were the worst at grammar thought they'd done really well. The people who were good at grammar thought they'd done okay. And only the people in the middle really kind of understood where they'd fallen on this particular thing. And that's they did it over and over and over and over again. And they found that they literally were able to plot a curve on all 4 of those studies where they were kind of like, if you've got this much knowledge about a thing, this is how it works. And they said that it rose from 2 things. They were able to find out personality in people who would fall on either of those things. And they said that a lack of metacognition was responsible for people who are on the shallow end of that, which means those people who don't reflect on their own thought processes, right? So those people who haven't sat and thought about, like, why do I know this thing? Why is this thing something I'm so confident about? So you'll suffer from the Dunning-Kruger effect quite a lot if, say, you have read a lot of WhatsApps about the fact that vaccines aren't efficient.
Right.
But you've never asked yourself how you know the vaccines aren't efficient. If you sat down for a minute and you said, "Ooh, actually, I read a bunch of nameless fucking WhatsApps from my crazy aunt. That's how I know the vaccines don't work." Then you'll never question your ability. So if you're the kind of person who constantly questions where their information comes from, you're unlikely to suffer from the Dunning-Kruger effect on that side. You're unlikely to be you're more likely to be aware of how much or how little you know, if you're just capable of thinking about that.
It makes me think of the oaks at school that after we wrote a test, and some oaks were like, I nailed that thing, eh? Yes, I nailed that, smashed that test. And then they get like 45, like, shit, man, it's not fair. I thought I smashed it. What's that? It's not fair. And then there were some oaks who were like, geez, I think that was hectic, man. And they ended up getting like 75. Like, bro, you did well. Yeah, I thought I cocked that up. And it's like,
it's exactly, but it's
crazy.
exactly the thing, because ultimately these guys, Dunning-Kruger, decided you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what you don't know.
Yes,
You only
that's
know.
become a popular little phrase.
You only know what you know. Yeah. So ultimately, if you only know what you know and you never question where you got your information, you're very likely to suffer from Dunning-Kruger.
Wow.
Then what happened is in 2008, another bunch of researchers came up and they tested whether Dunning-Kruger was real, because now obviously we're in the decade where a lot of tests can't be replicated. So now people are kind of deciding, are we going to try and replicate these things? And in fact, they came up with a curve that was pretty much exactly the same as the Dunning-Kruger curve. They discovered that the lower 25% are more likely to think they know a lot more than they do. The upper 25% are likely to underestimate their ability. And only those somewhere in the middle who kind of think about it are able to test this. And so Dunning-Kruger's become a thing. It's literally like the internet. You'll see it like it's become an accepted thing. However, and this is where my fact becomes false. In 2021 study, researchers used, and I hate saying this word, electroencephalograms. Is that how you say it?
It's like electrodes on your head, eh?
Yeah, they used electroencephalograms to measure brain activity and to compare it to the time it takes for a person to assess themselves as being either a low or a high performer. And then they found out from this that that in order to reach these decisions, the person uses different thought and memory processes.
Oh.
So it's actually it's got more to do with the time you take to remember facts and events produces a more realistic and accurate response in your brain. So if you think about a thing before you tweet, for instance, let's say you, instead of tweeting instantly, you sit down and you think to yourself, oh, is this right? Is this accurate? Then you are more likely to use a different pathway in your brain and therefore come up with a more accurate assessment of whether you know a thing. If you don't think about it, so technically Dunning-Kruger, when they said the metacognition, if you think about where your thought comes from and you spend some time thinking about it, that's actually more important than how much you know. So it means that actually it's a different brain process. So there's some question marks about whether Dunning-Kruger's a thing. The stupid people, essentially, if you are a stupid person on the internet, if you have been going onto Twitter and telling people that vaccinations are bullshit, just spend an hour thinking about where you got your information from. Next time you're going to tweet, think about it. Think, what is the likelihood of this have the people who got vaccinations died within a year, like was predicted was going to happen? No, they haven't. So therefore, what is the likelihood that that information you received in the first place was true? So if you think about that, you can beat Dunning-Kruger, essentially. So you don't have to be stupid just because you're ignorant and you don't know what you don't know. You can overcome Dunning-Kruger simply by thinking about your own thoughts and spending a little bit more time before you tweet.
How do we know this stuff? Lovely. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the
So
key
actually,
question.
Dunning-Kruger isn't a real thing. It isn't a real thing. You aren't consigned to make a fool of yourself on the internet just because you know nothing about something. If you think about why you know nothing, or think about the facts that you think you know, you're less likely to make an ass of yourself.
Yeah, just say, I heard this from this oak in V-Town the other day, and he said, and then at least people know it's not you.
It turns out, ironically, that thinking you understand Dunning-Kruger is an example of Dunning-Kruger.
Oh, is that
That's
circular
my
reasoning?
That's my
Isn't that
punchline. Yeah,
circular
that's my
reasoning?
punchline.
Very clever. Look at us spotting the ironies and things.
Yeah, because it wasn't, in fact, true.
Well,
Stupid joke.
from Dunning-Kruger
Yeah.
to Hannibal Lecter, another...
We're talking about the brain eating now.
Yes,
So that's
well...
psychologically interesting.
Yes. My fact is that despite the character of Dr. Hannibal Lecter being fictitious, it is fictitious, and perhaps with nuanced and diverse inspirations from a number of people, it is believed that the inspiration for the character comes mostly from one real-life person.
Probably John Wayne Gacy. I know John Wayne Gacy, I don't know whether this is a real thing, but I know John Wayne Gacy has basically inspired, I think, something like 75% of psychopaths in movies. You know, he was responsible for Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Oh, yes.
He was so he was responsible for Killer Clown and it. He's
I
John Wayne
see.
Gacy's basically
He's the
created our
dude.
image of what a modern psychopathic killer should be like. You know, I mean, Buffalo Bill in Silence of the Lambs is, I think, based on John Wayne Gacy. So there's maybe where I've gone down a pathway I've thought that. So yeah.
So you say it's fact
So
is
I'm
true?
saying it's possible that he was based on one person. You know, so serial killing and the psychology behind serial killing is quite interesting because they say there's two types of people who kill. There's what they call the messy killers, who are the chaotic, they go out and they live in garbage in their homes.
Oh, yeah.
You know, their brains don't function properly, and they're more likely to do kind of spontaneous kills near
And
their
make
homes. Make mistakes, yeah, and be a lot more brutal. And then you get the kind of that thinking, more intelligent than the average banana serial killer. You know, not that I like to give serial killers any kind of credit whatsoever. I think
Yes.
they've got tiny penises, all of them, every single one of them. But but there's that other kind who plans their murders and then executes them with an intention to escape, and to Zodiac killer, try and mislead the police and thinks that they're so smart they'll never get caught. So, you know, Hannibal Lecter's one of those types. So it's possible that he was based on somebody, I think.
Yeah, so I think the guy who wrote the book, it was a book first. He was a journalist, and there was a pulp fiction magazine called Argosy in the 1960s. Thomas Harris, he interviewed mental patient Dykes Askew Simmons. But he's not the dude. He was on death row in Nueva Leon State Prison, Monterey, for killing 3 people. But Simmons had been shot by a prison guard and treated by a skilled prison doctor, who Harris referred to as Dr. Salazar in the Pulp Fiction piece. Now, but this Dr. Salazar, Harris interviewed him, and he spoke about Askew's facial disfigurements, his victim's physical attractiveness, and the nature of torment. And Harris described him as a small, lithe man with dark red hair, who stood very still with a certain elegance about him. And the prison guard later told Harris that Salazar was a murderer who could package his victim in a surprisingly small box. Salazar inspired Harris to create a character with a peculiar, understanding of the criminal mind.
So what you're saying is Salazar, this doctor,
The doctor.
was actually a killer.
Yeah, so I don't know how the events unraveled, but it is believed. So Salazar is in this little Pulp Fiction article before Hannibal Lecter. But it was a true story based on his interview of a doctor. But it's believed his name is Alfred Barley Trevino, the last criminal to be condemned to death in Mexico in 1959. Barley was a physician from an upper-class Monterrey family who murdered his friend and lover Jesus Castillo Rangel and mutilated his body. He was also suspected of killing and dismembering several hitchhikers in the countryside during the late 1950s and early 60s. Harris incorporated some of these details also into Buffalo Bill's development as the killer in The Silence of the Lambs, but he was the main inspiration for Dr. Hannibal Lecter. And some other trivia: Barley's sentence was commuted to 20 years, and he was released in 1981. After his release, he continued working as a physician in an austere office until his death in 2009.
Right. So what you're saying is there was a Pulp Fiction article
by Harris
with made up
Dr.
names.
Salazar, yes.
But about an interview with a Dr. Salazar, but it was actually about.
Yes,
about
Alfred
this there. All right.
Barley Trevino. Monterrey, so that's Mexico.
That the Barley Trevino guy definitely was a killer because they referred to him by his middle name. That's how you spot a serial killer. As soon as somebody's like, "Hello, my name is Warren David Robertson," you're like, "Motherfucker kills people.
Run!
Motherfucker kills people. Run for the hills." Like, what? How did he know? And particularly if their middle name is Wayne. I think there's...
Wayne.
No, this is a lie. This feels like an internet urban myth, right? Is that the middle name Wayne confers some sort of serial killing ability? Because there's been a percentage of people who were serial killers in America with a middle name Wayne, but I believe not statistically relevant. Yeah.
Wow.
All right. So we're on to multiple choices.
Oh, sweet.
All right. So my multiple choice is a very psychological multiple choice, and it is about how you handle multiple choice questions.
I love that. Again, the circular reasoning.
No, here it goes. So when handling a multiple choice question on a topic you haven't studied, right? Psychological studies suggest the best thing to do is A, go with your gut choice and stick with it. B, always change away from your first choice. C, the test is unlikely to be statistically random as it's usually written by hand. Analyzing earlier answers you got correct will likely reveal patterns in the moderator's attempts to appear random. Mm-hmm. D, always answer C. E, always go with the most in-depth answer.
Oh, okay. I think the advice would be, I'm favoring the first two. Either go with your gut or go with your gut initially and then change it to the other thing that's trying to catch you on.
Here's the question. When handling a multiple choice question on a topic you haven't studied, studies suggest the best thing to do is go with your gut and stick with it. Always change away from your first choice. A, go with your gut and stick with it. B, always change away from your first choice. C, the test is unlikely to be statistically random as it's usually written by hand. Analyzing earlier answers you got correct will likely reveal patterns in the moderator's attempts to appear random. D, always answer C. Or E, always go with the most in-depth answer.
No, I wouldn't bother with always go with C, and I wouldn't bother with analyzing, previous patterns.
Right. Which is weird because that's C.
Yeah.
This is what I've...
I'm gonna go with B actually. So go,
So always change away
from the first choice. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. That's what my final answer.
Kind of game theory, right? That is game theory.
Yes,
you should always swap away from your first.
Yeah, and then we mess with it in game shows where you're like, are you sure you want to go with that? You sure?
Yeah.
You sure you want to swap back?
Yeah. So you're saying, okay, all right. So A, go with your gut and first choice and stick with it. So this, for the longest time, was the advice by people who taught people how to do multiple choices, like the SATs in America, was they said, go with your gut and stick with it. Because a lot of people have heard this, but it's wrong for a number of reasons. Because our gut reaction is developed not on intellect. It's developed on things like
the available heuristic, so the thing that's most in front of you. So like that's why supermarkets will put all the things they make the most profit on in the middle shelves, because the available heuristic, the available option, is the choice you're most likely to go for. So the one that's at eye level is the one you're most gut level likely to go for. Yeah, and then there's the desire to avoid regret, which means that you're less likely to change away from your first answer, because you don't want to find out later that it was the correct answer and now you're going to have regret. And then, there's all sorts of reasons why, you're more likely to remember a time when you changed away from your original answer and chose a second one, and then it proved to be the bad choice rather than it proved to be the right choice. So there's all these things that kind of charge at you about that first choice that makes the first choice, going with your gut reaction, actually generally no better for you than anything else. Likewise, always changing away from your first choice offers you no benefit, because it's the same thing. So if you reject that and you always change away and you choose something else, you're still going with something that's ultimately random. Right? All right, so C, I put C as the very long one because D is always answer C and E is go with the long one. So it kind of, I was saying to you with D and E, always go for C. That the test is unlikely to be statistically random as it's usually written by hand. This is true. So this is a true fact, that first half. But analyzing the earlier answers you got correct won't necessarily reveal a pattern, and therefore you're still just dealing with randomness.
Yes.
Always go with the most in-depth answer is an interesting one. There's no statistical evidence to prove it, but they say, like, why would somebody write as many facts as they're writing there in that particular thing, wasting ink in their printer, wasting time to write the thing out? But there's no statistical relevance. It's just a theory. There's no benefit to it. The answer is actually D. Always answer C.
Oh, my word.
Yeah, because in fact, while there's no psychological reason to do it, the maths of this teaches us that choosing to answer all the questions you don't know with the exact same answer means you're more likely to score points than doing it randomly. Because by choosing to answer, so it's got to do with randomness and how randomness works. But essentially, the maths basically says you pick a letter right at the start of your multiple choice test, and you always answer all of the ones you don't know with the same thing. You're much more likely to score more points than if you try to answer randomly. Because what you're trying to with the one, you're just letting randomness decide. Effectively, by going A, you're giving yourself a randomness, so it's likely to be 1 in 4 you will get correct.
Yes.
Whereas with the other one, because you're trying to defeat randomness, you actually do end up defeating randomness, but the math suggests that you defeat it against yourself. Yeah. So ultimately, the answer is always answer C, or A, or B, or D, or E, whatever it is. Just always just answer the same thing.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
That is so fascinating. That is also, and I've gone with also a testing one. This is such a testing one. No, it's about IQ tests and the psychology link. Well, there is a great book I read called IQ: How Psychology Hijacked Intelligence, and the guy was really throwing shade on IQ tests and their validity and that sort of thing. And we can talk about this once you've had a crack at this test.
Okay.
Which of these can affect your IQ score? Schooling and regular testing, nutrition, a stimulating environment, all of the above, none of the above. So there's 5 options. So we've got which can affect your IQ score: schooling and regular testing, nutrition, stimulating environment, all of the above, none of the above.
So I know that one of the things they've said about IQ tests that they've shown recently is that, in fact, they're culturally different people will answer the IQ test differently. So that the IQ tests as they exist at the moment are actually there to test Western white people. And because they were developed in the West, and they test Western white people extremely successfully, but they do not test people from other cultures extremely successfully. So they are piss poor at determining intelligence. And I'm certain, based on that there's almost certainly other factors that come in, whether it's these factors. I'd be inclined to lean towards them, like things like schooling and whether you're tested regularly. The more often you do an IQ test certainly changes how good you become at IQ tests. A modern IQ test is just like I've got to look at this block and work out what's on the other side of it, or I've got
I see this pattern, and I've got to work out how this thing works. So it's almost certainly the kind of thing that you would get better at, just like you'd get better at a Sudoku the more of them you did.
Yeah.
But yeah, so all right. Let me say all of them affect like IQ tests.
Spot on. Nailed it. Absolutely. Because it begs the question, innate intelligence, is that not what they're trying to solve for? And I don't, it looks like nurture is a far more powerful thing than nature when it comes to, but we'll know examples in our lives, and people talk all the time, and his dad's a doctor, so he's got the doctor gene, and he's going to do well.
See, but that's not what I took from that at all. This is the exact opposite of what I took from it. What I took from it is the test itself is flawed because it's not really testing intelligence. What it's testing is your ability to take the test.
Well, yes, and your exposure to things.
But I'm saying it's not testing your intelligence. It's failing to actually test intelligence. Intelligence could come from anywhere. Intelligence could be born, nature, or nurture, or whatever it is. But this thing is actually testing your ability to take an IQ test.
Yeah.
It's not testing your intelligence. And that's where I'm kind of like... That's what I take from that.
Well, and there's a new study. I think it's called the Flynn effect or something. But it's like, yeah, the more... the more, when they took a population and then 20 years later that population does another IQ test, they actually have a higher IQ. So what's going on there? But it can have a reverse effect in some countries. It's having a reverse effect. So it's just, I don't know, all the hoo-ha about IQ.
I think we struggle to actually test intelligence. I think this is another thing, is they're finding that there's multiple layers to intelligence, right? So you can be really good in one area and really terrible in another area. So you can be great, you're incredibly intelligent at remembering general knowledge facts and spewing them out on some shitty podcast.
Yeah, hey!
But you can be terrible at maths. And I'm not speaking specifically here about someone sitting on this side of the table, but it could be someone sitting on this side of the table. So what they're finding is that different people have different areas of intelligence, and an IQ test doesn't really test that. They've tried to divide the IQ test into sections to check different kind of aspects of intelligence, but they really don't. They don't and as I say, I think it more tests specifically your ability to take a test.
To take a test, and that's just like if there's certain kids who excel at academics, then they've just got this amazing ability to digest info and to spit it out on a paper again and sort of assimilate it. And
interestingly, people who say have ADHD, which is shown to be generally very intelligent people, would struggle to do that, struggle to learn it. But you know what I love about all of this? Is we've just thrown those anti-vaccine kids a bone. Because those of them who are still here, they've been sitting there in the early part of this. Fuck you, Oaks. fucking the vaccine is killing people. I don't care. Well, congratulations. You failed your IQ test, not because you're stupid, but because the IQ test has got nothing to do with intelligence. So we just threw you a giant bone. Please don't downvote this video. Go and undo your downvote. Give us enough.
Yes, please do. We hope you enjoyed our crack at psychobabble.
Yeah.
It's psychobabble our way into the future.
Essentially, it's very difficult to do a podcast of facts about stuff that's got very little to do with facts, right? It's very hard area of science. And we're fucking science.
Just watch out for people who love bomb you, trauma bond you, future fake you.
Yeah.
And
guys, talk to your friends.
Talk
to your friends. Talk to your wise aunt. Talk to each other. That's just as good for you as going to a psychologist. Do it. Talk to people. Tell them how you feel. There you are. Have friends. That's also a start. Sorry, anti-vaxxers.
I feel a little tipsy. But that's cool.
Sorry, anti-vaxxers. I thought I was being nice to you, but I just told you to have friends, and now look what's happened. Because they all died because they got the clot shot. Anyway, this turned into a weird... Thank you very much.
Thanks for watching.
Share, put a comment.
Join us soon for another episode. Bye.
Bye.
Good night, good morning,
Bye-bye.
and good afternoon.
Bye-bye.